Hi, I'm going to be talking mostly about the readings from week 4 and week 5. Um, just want to start off saying that for the reading in week 4, I'm pretty sure the article was just titled Race. I didn't really understand anything it was saying. I also had like a really bad migraine while I was reading that, so maybe that was just it. But even revisiting it, I don't even exactly know what I didn't understand about it. It just didn't, the article just wasn't connecting in my brain for some reason. So I don't even know what questions to ask about the article to make it make sense in my brain. But yeah, I just didn't really understand what it was talking about. And then for another article, an article that I found interesting under week 4, I think the article was titled like Gender. I found it really interesting how it started off, because we're told now that like sex and gender are two different things, that sex is a biological factor and gender is more of a social and like cultural impact. But it gave a story about like a baby who there was a mishap when they were little, and so they had gender reassignment surgery, I think what it was. And the doctor just said, well, it's young enough that if you just raise it like a girl, they should be fine. And then they had like a lot of issues growing up, and eventually the child ended up killing themselves after finding out like what happened. And so I thought that was really interesting, and how the article brought up the question like, well, maybe gender is biological based off of that story. I'm not really sure about the science of all of that, but I thought it was interesting how, they brought back into question what is gender biological, or is gender like more of like a social construct kind of thing. And then it started talking about in that same article about drag queens and drag kings, and that kind of brought into the question like how gender is performative. And I don't exactly know what they were saying with this part, but they were saying how drag queens are more, I think the term they used was disidentified with femininity. And so I'm not really sure what, I think that's meaning that they don't have like that same identification with femininity with like the gender of female. And I feel like that's them, the article is saying that they do it as more of a performative thing, that they are just performing under like this like gender stereotype, I guess, kind of. I'm not really sure. And then how it was talking about but drag kings do a more sincere imitating, inhibiting, and performing masculinity. And so I'm not exactly sure what this part is saying, but it kind of sounds like to me that they're saying that when with drag kings, it's more that they are actually identifying with masculinity, unlike how drag queens are doing it more as a performative thing. So I thought that was interesting. Not sure if I'm interpreting that correctly, but that's kind of what it seemed like to what it was saying to me. And then going on to week 5, the reading about shame and how it's like inherent in all of us, and that society kind of amplifies it because we have certain norms, and if we don't fit into those norms, then there has to be something wrong with us, right? That we have to be fitting into these certain roles that everyone has, or we should all look a certain way, we should act a certain way, and how that's not true. And I thought it was really interesting how they were talking about with people with disabilities, like saying that they need like a cure, or that they need to be fixed in some way, when really people would prefer if you would just like stop being ableist instead of, searching for a cure. So I thought that was really interesting how they're saying that, like, with disabilities, there shouldn't be any shame associated with it. It should just be an acceptance of, I was born different, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a defect. The person may not be part of a norm, but it's not necessarily a defect, and that the word defect itself just is like made to make someone feel shame. And they're saying the same thing with transgenders, of how some label being transgender as a birth defect as well, when it's not. It's just that that they were like, there's a certain wording that they put it. I'm trying to see if I wrote in my notes. That they're a different variation of, like, how there's just a bunch of different variations of people, and transgender and disabled are just part of one of the different types of variations that there can be. And the article is pretty much just talking about how the word like defected, disformity, that's just leaving room for shame, because it makes it seem like if you're more of a problem that needs to be solved, rather than just being the person that you are. And so I thought that was really interesting how they talked about how, certain words and certain things in our society like just bring on shame, and that if we could correct that, then maybe we wouldn't feel that shame. And then the comedy special of I think the comedy special's name was Nanetta. I might be pronouncing that wrong. And she brought into the conversation about shame just a little bit. How that they were ashamed to share their story, and to a certain extent how we're supposed, like with comedians, that they're supposed to be, covering up their traumas with comedy, make people laugh, but that jokes aren't going to solve your trauma. It's not going to make anything feel better, and instead it just covers up the true story that a person may want to tell. And in their case, they wanted to tell their story, and that was the whole reason why they were talking about how they might come to the decision that they want to quit comedy, because they want to be able to speak their true self. They don't want to be having to cover up their pain with self-deprecating jokes. They don't want to have to be making light of a situation that isn't light. And how that, like, just feeling shame, in how just shame in general of having something happen to you and feeling like you can't do anything about it, feeling like you should cover it up, because who would care? And so yeah, I thought I really liked her special. And what I kind of got out of it at the end was that we should be able to fight back against hate and against bad things that happen to us in our life without, like, the fear of being reprimanded by society, without the fear of someone not caring, or about, just about getting more hate for saying, like, hey, Ken, maybe you care about me. So yeah, I really like that special. And yeah, those are my little notes.